Right guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm in this Jaguar X-Type. I've been meaning to film with the Jaguar X-Type for a while, but in 2021 it's quite difficult to find a nice one. This one arrived with me a couple of days ago and I thought, that's the one. The Jaguar X-Type was a compact executive car which ran from 2001 all the way to 2010. It was a very important car for Jaguar to get right because it was up against, well, fierce competition basically from the Germans. This was up against the BMW 3 Series, the Mercedes C-Class, the Audi A4, so it had to be right. It was the first car in Jaguar's history which was available with a diesel engine. It was also available as a 4-cylinder, front-wheel drive, and an estate. These were all previously unheard of for the upmarket British marque. The X-Type was designed and sold during the period when Jaguar was owned by Ford. It was built on a modified version of the Ford Mondeo platform, which sadly meant that it was doomed before it even left the production line. Not because the Mondeo was a bad car, because it certainly wasn't, but because it just became the butt of all jokes. Rather than the X-Type being celebrated for finally being a reliable, economical, practical, affordable Jaguar, it was ridiculed. It was nicknamed the Mondeo with the Jaguar badge, and I think ultimately it did the brand more harm than good. It just cheapened the brand. I think all of that's quite unfair because the X-Type isn't a bad car. I think Ford would have been far better by keeping the cards closer to the chest and not telling the whole world that it was based on the humble Mondeo. Styling wise, I always thought they looked alright. It's quite clean and orderly. It's subtle and conservative. It doesn't offend. It offends me now when I see them suffocated by cheap chrome bits the owners bought off eBay. They've usually got one of those silly jumping Jaguars on the bonnet that Derek's fitted himself with his Black & Decker on a Sunday afternoon. Most of them aren't even centralised. But generally speaking, nice, fresh, stock examples do look alright. If you opt for a facelift model from 2008 onwards, like the model I'm in today, you get slightly more aggressive styling. You get the sporty mesh grille at the front, and you get indicators in the wing mirrors. It's all a little bit more contemporary. They just offer something a little bit different rather than all the run-of-the-mill German stuff. The sport models look even better because they come with far less chrome and slightly bigger wheels which actually fit in the wheel arches better. If I'm being really critical of the styling, the rear of the saloon version does look a little bit pinched, but overall, a half-decent motor. The estate version of the X-Type, which incidentally was designed by Ian Callum, is a great-looking car. I've got a soft spot for those. If I could find a nice low-mileage 3-litre all-wheel drive auto, I think I'd just buy it and tuck it away somewhere. Moving inside the X-Type, the interior isn't quite so good. At first glance it all looks alright, but on closer inspection, it's a little bit cheap. Some of the buttons and switches, which have all been stolen from the Ford parts bin, are a little bit Fisher-Price. Take for example the indicators, which look very Ford. They all feel very flimsy. And listen to this. This is the centre armrest here. Just not the greatest quality, is it? Thankfully though, the seats and the steering wheel do feel much nicer. The leather feels quite expensive actually. Quite a contrast to some of the plastic bits. That said, everything works well. If you go for a reasonably spec model, then you get all the optional extras you'd expect from anything remotely luxurious. You get 2 cup holders, sat-nav, heated seats, part electric seats. The stitching on the leather on the door cards all looks quite upmarket. The infotainment system is the same system you'd find in the S-Type and the XJ, and it's all very easy to use. It's part touchscreen, partly controlled by buttons. The actual display of the sat-nav is showing its age a little bit. It looks like something that Atari would make in the 80s. But it still works. As of 2005, Bluetooth hands-free was available, meaning you could take calls while you're driving and not get 3 points. Thankfully, all the windows on this are electric. I've had some over the years which have manual wind-up windows in the rear, which I always thought was poor form from Jag. Interior space is pretty good. There's plenty of headroom, plenty of legroom, plenty of elbow space. It's all quite comfortable up front. In the back, it's a little bit more cramped, but no more than you'd expect in a 3 Series or C-Class or A4. You do have quite a big transmission tunnel in the back, which will restrict legroom for the poor bugger that's sat in the middle. The boot space is pretty good at 452 litres, although the actual opening of the boot is quite narrow, and the boot space itself is quite shallow. In terms of how the X-Type drives, I think Jaguar really nailed the handling. It feels quite agile. It certainly picked its feet up. There's not much body roll, the steering feels quite responsive, and to top it all off, it's a very comfortable car this. You could drive this for hours and hours and hours and and not get out the other side looking like you've got a slipped disc. Even though this is the sport model, it soaks up the bumps really well. I've also noticed very little road noise as I've been driving this, which means you could drive this all day long on the motorway in peace and harmony, and then get off and still enjoy some fast B roads. If you compare this to the 3 Series of the time, the 3 Series is unnecessarily firm. It crashes around, whereas this doesn't. This particular car is now 10, 11 years old. It's only done 41,000 miles. And apart from a slightly annoying creaky dash, there aren't many more rattles or creaks. You just get the impression that the X-Type was set up with the real world in mind, not Laguna Seca. Overall, it does feel quite refined. I mean, bear in mind, the model I'm in today is a 2-litre diesel, so you can hear that clattery 4-cylinder Ford engine, but it's not too bad. There were quite a few engines to choose from. Interestingly, all the petrol options were V6s. It started with the 2.1-litre V6 with 157 horsepower. You can tell the 2.1s because they only have one exhaust. Then there was the 2.5-litre V6 with 194 horsepower and twin exhausts, and the range-topping 3-litre V6 with 230 odd horsepower. The smaller engine was front-wheel drive only, whereas the bigger V6s were available with all-wheel drive. Now, personally, I would go for an all-wheel drive model because you just get extra grip and no torque steer. Because I've had lots of these over the years, I've driven every single engine option. The 3-litre V6 feels genuinely quick, whereas the rest are just adequate. Because this is Europe, where petrol costs around £6 a gallon, there were a couple of diesel options which are much more frugal. There was the 2-litre diesel with 128 horsepower, or the 2.2-litre diesel with 145. Both do a pretty reasonable job. The model I'm in today is the 2-litre diesel with a 5-speed manual, which, to be honest, I wouldn't buy a Jaguar with a manual gearbox. It's alright, there's nothing wrong with it, but I just think Jag should be automatic. Weirdly, you couldn't buy the X-Type as a diesel automatic until 2008, and then sadly it wasn't the standard J-gate auto gear lever, it was a more conventional affair. This model is by far and away the most economical X-Type money could buy. You'll average 47 miles per gallon combined. Used prices here in the UK start at around £500, but that's going to get you a bit of a lemon. For a half-decent model, you'll have to spend between 3 and 5 grand. If you're looking to buy one, I would advise going for the big 3-litre petrol all-wheel drive automatic, but that's not to everyone's taste. That's my advice for everything, always go for the big petrol with 2 pedals. If you do opt for the 3-litre V6, you're looking at about 20 miles per gallon around town and 33 on a motorway run. If you want a more economical, more affordable Jag, then this 2-litre diesel is your best bet. It's cheaper road tax too. Overall, the X-Type's a pretty good car. Yes, it's a little bit cheap around the edges, but I don't think it deserves all the nicknames or all the bad press. Here in the UK, it is seen as a bit of an old man's car. There is a slight whiff of the Freemason about it. If you're in the lodge and you're thinking about buying an old X-Type, there are a few things you need to be aware of, which shouldn't be a problem because you'll have been taught to be cautious anyway. The biggest issue with the X-Type is rust. They always seem to rust on the sills and around the wheel arches. I've had lots of these over the years and I've had to replace numerous sills. Later models were improved slightly, but if you think about buying an X-Type, I would recommend getting it undersealed just to protect it. While we're on the subject of potential issues, the diesel models can cause you some trouble too. The injectors can go, EGR valves can go, turbos can blow, glow plugs need to be replaced. To be fair, that's just standard diesel stuff, isn't it? That could happen on any diesel car. Also, the manual diesels have quite an expensive clutch and flywheel setup, so if you need to replace the clutch, you're looking at the best part of £1,000 to replace. The petrols are much more reliable on the whole. The engines are old Ford units, they're chain driven, and they're tough as old boots. The auto gearboxes are traditional units with torque converters, and they're known to be quite reliable. Well, I think that pretty much sums up the X-Type. They offer great value on the used market. They're very comfortable, quite reliable, quite economical, depending on the model you go for. But ultimately, it's been tainted by all those bitter people who like to remind you that you're driving a Mondeo with a Jag badge. These are the same sorts of bitter people who refer to the Boxster as a poor man's 911. To be honest with you, if I wanted a comfortable runaround and I only had a couple of grand to spend, I could think of far worse options than a 3-litre automatic all-wheel drive X-Type. Anyway, thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll leave the link below. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know below and I'll do my best to get back to you. If you're interested in getting into the used car business, check out my online course. I've created an online portal with nearly 100 videos which explain everything about the motor trade, how to start, funding options, where to buy stock from, trade plates, insurance, everything you could possibly wish to know. So if you're interested, check out the link below. Cheers guys, I'll see you next time.